Welcome everybody to the second edition of this Nobel Talk series here in the metaverse of the Swiss Pavilion in the Virtual Expo, Osaka 2025. Once again, it is for me a pleasure to welcome you to this series of events of such a high caliber in this new format. My name is Claudio Tesona, and I am professor of blockchain and distributed ledger technologies at the University of Zurich, and I am also heading the Blockchain Center. That is the partner of Present Switzerland, to whom we are grateful to allow us this stage, and which is the entity that has been developing this space. The room in which you are now, the virtual room in which you are now, is a digital twin of the aula, that is a historic building at the University of Zurich that is very renowned locally and Switzerland as a whole, because it is the place where Winston Churchill, right after the Second World War, gave his famous speech asking for Europe to rise again after the devastation of that period. And so for us, it is a pleasure to welcome there and to get to know a little bit more about our university and Switzerland as a whole. But this series of events would not be possible without the space that Present Switzerland gave us in this virtual pavilion, and also the fantastic collaboration that we have with Metapeace that allowed this fantastic series of events happening. This is a series of events, and this means that this is just the second lecture by a Nobel Laureate that we are happy to have here in the virtual aula. Remember that on the 17th of July, we will have Didier Queloz from physics. He's from Switzerland, actually. On the 24th of September, we will talk about biodiversity by Hans Rudolf Herren, and then Aaron Sichanover will be talking about personalized medicine at the end of the semester and closer to the end of this series of events. As I said, we are really happy for this collaboration that allowed us to have these events, and we are really happy I will give the stage to Yanis from Metapeace, that is the partner in this series of events. Yanis, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudio, for this nice introduction. And distinguished participants and friends, as president of the Metapeace Association, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's Nobel Talk. And science and technology are not only engines of innovation, but they are also important pillars of peace and transformative development. The Nobel Talks make use of the open and accessible nature of virtual worlds to offer a playful platform for dialogue where audiences from all walks of life across geographies can enjoy the wisdom of Nobel laureates from all disciplines. And the realization of this project is only possible thanks to our dedicated partners. So thank you so much, Professor Claudio Tesona and your team of the University of Zurich Blockchain Center, the team of Present Switzerland for our great collaboration, and all our supporters who have made this event a reality. And today we are truly honored and very happy by the presence of Nobel laureate Eric Maskin, whose groundbreaking work has reshaped modern economic theory and the way we design markets and institutions. Professor Maskin has generously agreed to share his insights with us, and for this, we express our deepest gratitude. Thank you, Professor Maskin, for your commitment to advancing a more peaceful and just society through your work. And for everyone, please enjoy the talk ahead. And I would now, before we start, like to hand over to Professor Marek Pichia from the Department of Economics at the University of Zurich.
Thank you. There is no doubt that Eric Maskin is among the most influential economists today. He created the field of mechanism design, which is an economist term for rigorous study of policy making, when those affected by policy have relevant information that the policymaker might not have. Eric created the main concepts of mechanism design as well as establish its foundational results. This work was recognized by the 2007 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics that Eric shared with Leonid Hurwicz and Roger Myerson. In addition to the work on mechanism design, Eric contributed to truly many other areas in economics. With John Riley, he largely created the theory of auctions. With Jean Tirole, he laid foundations for modern industrial organizations. With Partha Dasgupta, he worked on social choice. With Jean-Jacques Lafond, on regulation. With Drew Fudenberg, on dynamic games. With Peter Diamond, on search models of labor markets. He also contributed to finance, environmental economics, organizational economics, political economics, and had very influential, policy influential studies of patents and innovation. In addition, Eric is among the main mentors in our profession. He trained over 70 doctoral students, including Abhijit Banerjee, Michael Kremer, and Jean Tirole, who by now have also received Nobel Prizes. Counting students of his students, Eric must have over 1,000 academic descendants. And myself, as a student of Jean Tirole and Abhijit Banerjee, I'm one of them. So it's a great pleasure, Eric, to have you with us. Dear all, let's give Eric the stage to tell us about mechanism design.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be with you. I do have the worry that my internet connection does not seem to be very good today. So I hope that you'll be able to hear me all right and see my slides. But what I'd like to do is to give you a brief introduction to the field of mechanism design, which Marek has described for you. I like to think of mechanism design as the engineering part of economics. Much of the time in economics, we look at existing economic institutions, say existing markets, and we try to predict or understand the outcomes that those institutions generate. And this is what is called the positive or predictive part of economics, and it's very important. It's about, I'd say, 80 or 90% of the field. But I'm actually interested in the other part of economics. In mechanism design, we actually reverse the direction. That is, we start with the outcomes. We start with the outcomes we would like to have. Those are our goals. And then we work backwards to figure out whether we could create institutions or mechanisms that would achieve those goals. So mechanism design is what we would call a normative or prescriptive study within economics. Now, what I've said so far is rather abstract, so let me go straight to a simple example. Let's imagine that you're a mother and you have a cake that you want to divide between your two children, Alice and Bob. And your goal is to divide the cake so that each child is happy with the piece that he or she has got. So that means that Bob should think that he has at least half the cake, and Alice should think that she has at least half the cake. And if we achieve this goal, we'll say that we have a fair division. So your goal is to achieve a fair division between the children. Now the question is, how do you do that? Well, if you know that you see the cake the same way that the children do, there's a simple solution. You just take a knife and you cut the cake exactly in half according to the way that you see the cake, and then you give each child one of the pieces. And because we're assuming that they see the cake the same way that you do, each of them will think that they have exactly half the cake. And so the problem is solved. Unfortunately, in reality, things are never this simple. You might think that you've cut the cake exactly in half, but the children may see the cake differently. So Bob may think that his piece is smaller than Alice's, and Alice might think that Bob's piece is smaller than hers. So if different people see the cake in a different way, this simple cutting the cake in half is not going to work. So one way of expressing the problem is to say that you want to achieve a fair division, but you don't actually have enough information to do this on your own. You don't know how the children see the cake, so you don't know how to achieve a fair division. Now, the mechanism design question then becomes, despite not having all of the relevant information, is there a mechanism that can be designed which will result in a fair division? Now, it turns out that this problem, this cake dividing problem, is actually very, very old. It goes back literally thousands of years. If you know the Old Testament of the Bible, you may remember that this problem was actually discussed. It wasn't discussed in terms of cake. It was discussed in terms of dividing land, grazing land, between Lot and Abraham. And interestingly, the Bible, the Old Testament, not only described the problem, but it gave the solution. And as you will see, the solution is extremely simple, but extremely ingenious. And that's one of the interesting qualities of mechanism design, that its solutions, after you see them, are often very, very simple, but very, very clever. And so here is the solution to the cake division problem. What the mother should do, what you should do as a mother, is to give the knife to one of the children, say to Bob, and have him cut the cake in two. So Bob cuts the cake in two, and then the other child, Alice, chooses which of the pieces she takes for herself. So this is called the divide and choose mechanism. And I claim that it will result in a fair division. So why does it work and achieve a fair division? Well, when Bob is cutting the cake, he will make sure that he cuts it in such a way that from his point of view, pieces are exactly equal. Why will he do this? Because he knows that if one of the pieces is bigger, Alice is going to take that one and he will be left with the smaller piece. So he will take care to make sure that the two pieces are exactly equal, so that whichever piece Alice takes, he will be happy with the other one. So Bob will be happy. And of course, Alice will be happy because she gets to choose her favorite piece. She gets to do the choosing between the two pieces. And we have solved the cake division problem. And of course, this is a very simple problem, but nevertheless, it illustrates an important feature, several important features of mechanism design. The first is that you, as the mother, don't know in advance which outcomes are best, which outcomes are fair, because you are lacking important information. And so the mechanism itself, in this case, the divide and choose mechanism that Bob and Alice go through, generate the information through Bob and Alice's participation. The other thing that's important to observe is that...
Hello, Professor. Sorry
Yeah.
for interrupt. Do you mind also change to a full screen mode?
What kind of screen?
To present, to change to a full screen mode. Because
I thought this was full screen.
now it's changed.
Is it all right? Can you see it?
Now we can see it perfectly because it was not updating. Now, the good thing that people is a learning experience for us all being here in the metaverse. So there was a small thing that some slides were not updating. Apologize for interrupting, but now it looks perfect.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So the important thing is that when you design a mechanism, you have to take into account the fact that the participants may not share your goals. So in the cake example, your goal as the mechanism designer, as the mother, is to achieve a fair division. But that's not Bob and Alice's goal. Each of them has the goal of just getting as much cake as they possibly can. So when you design a mechanism, you have to take into account the goals of the participants, their individual goals. In other words, the mechanism must be incentive compatible, that is, compatible with the incentives of the participants. All right, so that example is, as I say, very simple, and perhaps you don't regard cutting cakes as the most important problem in the world. So let's go on to a second example, which really has proved to be very important, and that is the problem of allocating frequencies on the radio spectrum to telecommunication companies. About 30 years ago, it was recognized by many governments around the world that it no longer made sense for the government to monopolize the radio spectrum, the frequencies on which broadcasts are made, because at that time, many different telecom companies were coming into existence, and they wanted to use these radio frequencies for mobile phones, for satellite TV, for Blackberries, for many new devices which required radio frequencies for their operation. And so what the government wanted to do was to take these frequencies and allocate them to the telecom companies who were going to make the best use of the radio frequencies. So this was an important real life issue for many governments. So let's look at a particular example of the frequency allocation problem. You're a government and you have a particular band of frequencies, and you want to allocate the license for using those frequencies to one of several telecom companies interested in the license. And you want to put the license into the hands of the company that values it the most, because that company is likely to create the most value for society. However, your problem is that you don't know how much each company values the license, and so you don't know what the most efficient outcome actually is. So that's your mechanism design problem, how to make sure that the license is put into the hands of the company that values it the most. Now, one simple mechanism you could try to use is to simply ask each company, how much do you value the license? And then to allocate the license to the company that claims that it has the highest value for the license. So that's very simple, but it's not going to work very well, because if companies understand that their chance of getting the license is bigger if they state a higher value, well, then they have an incentive to exaggerate their values. And so all of the companies will be exaggerating. And so there's no guarantee that the company that really does have the highest value will be quoting the highest number. And so you may not be identifying the right company through this simple mechanism. You might try a slightly more sophisticated mechanism. What you could do is to have each company make a bid for the license. A bid is a statement of how much the company is willing to pay. And then you could award the license to the high bidder, the bidder that makes the highest bid, and have the winner pay its bid. Now, this mechanism is better than the first one, because now companies will not exaggerate anymore, because they actually have to pay their bids. So if the license is worth 10 million to me, I'm not going to bid 12 million, because 12 million is too much to pay for something that's only worth 10 million to me. But the problem is that now this mechanism is going to give companies an incentive to understate. Let's see why that is. Let's imagine that you're one of the companies, one of the telecom companies. You're called Telemax, and let's suppose that the license is worth 10 million to you. If you bid 10 million and you won, well, you'd be getting something that's worth 10 million to you, but you'd be paying 10 million. So your net benefits from winning the license is zero. You would be getting nothing in net from winning the license. And so you're not going to bid 10 million. You're going to bid less than 10 million. But the problem is that if all bidders are bidding less than their true values, if they're understating, then once again, there's no guarantee that the winning bidder will actually be the company that values the license the most. So at this point, we've seen two mechanisms. In the first mechanism, you overstate your value. In the second mechanism, you understate your value as a company. And so the next question is, well, is there a mechanism that gets things exactly right so that companies neither exaggerate nor understate? And at first glance, it may seem that maybe there is no such mechanism. Maybe that's an impossibility. But it turns out, and this was discovered about 60 years ago by the American economist William Vickery that there is a mechanism that will work and get companies to bid exactly what their values are. And here's how it works. It's a bidding mechanism. So once again, each company makes a bid for the license. And once again, the winner is the highest bidder. But now, instead of paying its actual bid, the bid that it makes, it pays the second highest bid. So for example, if there are three bidders and one bids 10 million and one bids 8 million and one bids 5 million, the winner is the company that bids 10 million because that's the highest bid, but it doesn't pay 10 million, it pays 8 million because that is the second highest bid. So this is sometimes called the second price or second bid mechanism, or sometimes it's called the Vickery mechanism after William Vickery, the economist who discovered this remarkable mechanism. So let me try to show you that this mechanism actually solves the problem, that companies no longer will understate or overstate their values. So remember, Telemax, we're assuming, has a value of $10 million for the license. Now, would it ever want to understate that value and bid 8 million? Well, underbidding is not advantageous for Telemax because it doesn't pay its bid anyway. If it underbids, it's not going to reduce how much it pays because it pays the second highest bid, not its own bid. So if it bids 8 million and the second highest bid is 7 million, it pays 7 million anyway. The underbidding does not accomplish anything. And furthermore, if it bids 8 million rather than 10 million, it runs the risk of losing the license, because if it turns out that the second highest bid is 9 million, it's bidding 8 million, it's going to be outbid. It will lose the license altogether. So underbidding, understating is never advantageous, and it's a very risky strategy because it might mean that you lose the license. If you had bid what it was really worth to you, you would have won. You also don't want to overbid. You don't want to bid 12 million if the license is worth 10 million to you, because now you run the risk of overpaying. If some other company bids 11 million and you bid 12 million, you will win, but you will have to pay too much. You will have to pay 11 million. That's overpaying because the license is only worth 10 million to you. So I hope this shows you that if you are participating in a second price auction, a Vickery auction, where you pay the second highest bid, you should bid exactly what the license is worth to you. But if all companies are bidding exactly what the license is worth to them, then the winner will be the company that values the license the most. And indeed, we will solve the problem. The problem will be solved. And in fact, it was a variant of this second price auction, which was actually used to reallocate radio spectrum starting 30 years ago. So this very simple mechanism, this very clever mechanism, was the basis for allocating billions and billions of dollars worth of spectrum. Okay, let me discuss one final example. It will be an energy example, and it will involve our two friends, Alice and Bob, once again. Let's imagine that there's a society consisting of two consumers, Alice and Bob, and Alice and Bob are interested in consuming energy, and there's an energy authority which has to decide what form this energy will take. Will it be solar or wind or nuclear power or ethanol? So there are four choices, and the energy authority wants to choose one of the four, uh, which is best for Alice and Bob. But once again, the problem is that there's a lack of information. The energy authority doesn't know what Alice and Bob want. To simplify matters, let's suppose that there are two possibilities for what Alice and Bob want. Well, we'll call them state one and state two. In state one, Alice likes solar energy the best, and then wind, and then ethanol, and then nuclear power. In state two, she likes nuclear power the best, then solar, then ethanol, and then wind. So her preferences depend on the state. And the same thing for Bob. In state one, Bob likes nuclear power the best, then wind, then ethanol, then solar. And in state two, let me go back to the previous slide. In state two, he likes wind the most, then solar, then ethanol, and then nuclear power. So I've summarized Alice and Bob's preferences in this table here. And as I said, there are just two possibilities, state one and state two. Now, the energy authority would like to choose an energy source that makes a good compromise between what Alice wants and what Bob wants. So in state one, wind is a good compromise. Solar is not a good compromise because although Alice likes solar a lot, Bob doesn't like solar at all. So Bob puts solar at the bottom. And nuclear power is not a good compromise because Bob likes nuclear power, but Alice hates nuclear power. And ethanol is not a good compromise because both Alice and Bob prefer wind to ethanol. So you see in state one, wind is a good compromise solution for Alice and Bob. And by a similar argument, it's easy to see that solar is a good compromise in state two. So if the energy authority knew that state one is the true state, it would choose wind. And if it knew that state two was the true state, it would choose solar. But the problem is that the energy authority doesn't know which state is the actual state. Alice and Bob know, but the energy authority doesn't know. So how can it find this out? Well, once again, the simplest mechanism would be for the authority to simply ask Alice and Bob, what is the state? But the problem is that mechanism is not going to work because Alice, for example, knows that if she says state two, solar is more likely, the energy authority is more likely to choose solar. If she says state one, the energy authority is more likely to choose wind, but Alice prefers solar power to wind in both states. This is Alice's ranking in state one. This is Alice's ranking in state two. In both states, she prefers solar to wind. So she's going to say state two, regardless of what the actual state is, because she wants to get solar chosen. And Bob has the opposite incentive. He has the incentive to always say state one because he always prefers wind to solar. He prefers wind to solar in state one, and he prefers wind to solar in state two. So Alice will say state two, Bob will say state one, and the poor energy authority will have no idea what the actual state is. So this simple mechanism is not going to work. It will work. It's this table here. A game or a game table in which Alice chooses either the top row or the bottom row, and Bob chooses either the left column or the right column, and the outcome is, for example, if Alice chooses the bottom row and Bob chooses the right column, the outcome will be solar, because solar is in the second row, the bottom row, and it's in the right column. So what is going to happen if Alice and Bob play this little game where Alice chooses rows and Bob chooses columns if state one is the actual state? So remember, Alice and Bob know what the state is. The energy authority doesn't. So Alice and Bob know that state one is the actual state. Well, what is Alice going to do? Alice is going to want to choose the top row if she predicts that Bob is going to choose the left column. Why is that? Well, if Alice chooses the top row, then the outcome is wind. If she chooses the bottom row, then the outcome is nuclear. Remember, she's predicting that Bob is going to choose the left column. And notice that in state one, Alice prefers wind to nuclear power. So she will definitely choose the top row if she predicts that Bob will choose the left column. And furthermore, Bob will choose the left column because no matter what Alice does, he is always better in state one with the left column. If he chooses the left column and Alice chooses the top row, he gets wind rather than ethanol. And notice that Bob prefers wind to ethanol in state one. If he chooses the left column and Alice chooses the bottom row, he gets nuclear power rather than solar power. And notice that Bob prefers nuclear power to solar power in state one. So either way, Bob is going to choose the left column. And notice that that means that the outcome of this game, with Alice choosing rows and Bob choosing columns, is going to be wind in state one. Alice will choose the top row. Bob will choose the left column. The outcome is wind. And wind is exactly what the energy authority wants in state one. Remember, wind makes the best compromise between what Alice wants and Bob wants. So in state one, we have solved the problem with this little game. And if we go through exactly the same kind of argument, but now assuming that state two is the actual state, we will see that Alice now will choose the bottom row, Bob will choose the right column, and the outcome will be solar, which again is exactly what the Energy Authority wants. And so this little game given by this table solves the problem in our example 3. It implements what the Energy Authority wants to do. Now, let me sum up what I've been talking about. I showed you 3 examples: a cake example, a telecom example, an energy example. In all 3 cases, I showed you that there was a mechanism that solved the problem of getting to the best outcome. But you might complain that what I showed you was a little bit mysterious. It was a little bit magical, because I didn't explain how I found these mechanisms in the first place. You might say, well, given a mechanism design problem, is there a general way of determining whether there is a mechanism that will solve the problem? And if there is such a mechanism, how do we find it? Well, it turns out that those questions can be answered, and that's what I did in a paper many years ago, almost 50 years ago. I'm not going to go through that paper today, but if you're interested in finding out more about mechanism design, you might want to take a look at that paper. What I would like to conclude our discussion today with is the observation that mechanism design can be used for many things. It can be used for dividing cakes. It can be used for allocating radio spectrum. It can be used for solving energy problems, but it can also be used for solving some of the biggest problems that the world faces today. One of those problems is climate change. I'm sure all of you are aware that climate change is going on, that the Earth's atmosphere is warming up, and that we are responsible for that by emitting greenhouse gases like carbon into the atmosphere. How do we solve that problem? Well, the only really practical solution is an international treaty in which the different countries of the world agree to stop emitting greenhouse gases. We've had an attempt at such treaties in the past, but they've never been fully successful. What we need is a successful treaty. But if you think about it for a minute, designing a treaty which will solve the problem of greenhouse gas emission is a mechanism design problem. A treaty itself is a mechanism for solving the problem of climate change. Now, we have not solved climate change yet, but I am confident that we will solve it. And when we do, mechanism design will play a major role in that solution. Mechanism design can also be used to try to prevent financial crises. We had a major meltdown of the financial world in 2008, 2009. We want to stop that from happening again. Mechanism design, again, is the key to preventing financial crises. And then finally, one thing that I'm interested in currently is election reform. How do we make sure that the candidates who get elected to office really represent what the public wants? And that is a mechanism design problem as well. So I hope that in this very brief introduction to mechanism design, you are persuaded that first, mechanism design is an important topic. It can be used for solving some of the biggest problems that the world faces. And second, that it is an intellectually interesting and challenging problem. Finding mechanisms is an exercise in ingenuity. And so with that, with those observations, I will stop, and perhaps we can have some Q&A.
Thank you very much, Professor Maskin. It was a fantastic presentation. I would also like to welcome to the stage as well Professor Pijak as well. Thank you very much. And just to have a little bit of bookkeeping, I will be moderating the session. I only ask the people that is inside of the metaverse that if you have questions, just to simplify the communication flow, please write them down inside of the chat of the session, and I will be taking them one by one. So I'm really happy to take your questions. But Marek, if you want to start the round of questions, if you have any, it would be a pleasure.
Well, I enjoyed the clarity of the three examples.
I have a practical question in the meantime, that if you do not mind. That seems, in a way, it relates much to our own research, and is the following. How do you see, and which are the incompatibilities that you see in the way blockchains are designed from a mechanism point of view? Because you know that blockchains are a prime example of something that is a public infrastructure that you build based on incentives, and you try to incentivize participation on those. In general, we have seen that there is they have served mainly as a source of speculation, for example. And the question that I have in that regard is, what is your opinion on this? What is it, a failure in the way they are designed, or just they float? I'm really happy to hear what you think, what your opinion is.
Well, I am a great admirer of blockchain technology in the sense that it has the potential to solve problems of trust. If I want to make an exchange with someone on the other side of the world, someone I don't know anything about, blockchain gives me the potential for making that exchange without my having to trust that other person. Mm-hmm. And so that, I think, is a potentially powerful advance. I think it's going to make possible many transactions, many valuable transactions that would otherwise not be available. My main complaint about blockchain, though, is that so far its major application has been to cryptocurrency. And I don't think I am not a fan of cryptocurrency, and let me explain why. Cryptocurrency is an attempt to, in effect, replace ordinary money, euros or dollars or what have you, with private money, Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. I think that replacement is potentially dangerous. And let me explain why. One thing that central banks learned how to do in the 20th century was to correct business cycles. So, for example, if the economy got into a recession, central banks realized that they could fight that recession. They could bring the economy back to normal by creating more liquidity, by creating more money, which would enable investors to continue to invest, which would employ people in those investments, which would give consumers the wherewithal to buy products. The creation of liquidity would get us out of the recession. At the opposite extreme, if the economy is in danger of overheating, we're at full employment, full production, and now there's a danger of inflation, the central bank can fight inflation by reducing the money supply. Now, my complaint about cryptocurrency is that it takes that tool away from the central bank. The central bank is no longer regulating the money supply. The Bitcoin people are. And so monetary policy has lost its power. So I am a great fan of blockchain technology. I think it has many potentially good uses, but I'm not a fan of the particular application to private cryptocurrency.
Yeah. If you allow me, I will frame your answer and I will put it also as well in my room. I share your opinion. Thank you very much for this very interesting insights. We had a few questions from the audience. One of them is by Benjamin, who says, "Thank you, Professor Maskin, for the great talk. I think that mechanism design is a very attractive approach to solve modern problems, especially in a more digitized and automated world. I see people believe that mechanism design as some form of free markets can replace institutions. What is your opinion about this trade-off? Do you think that institutions may be actually replaced by mechanisms one day?"
Well, in fact, I think that institutions are mechanisms. So in a sense, mechanism design has always been with us. The free market is a mechanism. It's a way of enabling consumers and producers to exchange goods. The reason why mechanism design is interesting as a field of study is that there are some cases in which free markets don't work as well as we would like them to. Free markets work very well for ordinary goods like potatoes. If I want potatoes, I know just where I can go to get them. And potato sellers, people who are growing potatoes, know just where they can go to sell their potatoes. So the potato market works just great. We don't need to worry about that. But suppose that we want a clean air. Suppose that I don't like pollution. I want to buy clean air. Well, there's no market for clean air. I can't go out and buy clean air. So we can't rely on the free markets to provide me with clean air, what we have to do is to create a mechanism for fighting pollution. And that is where my subject, mechanism design, comes in. In effect, we're trying to use principles that we already know about from the free market, but we're using those principles in a new setting, in a setting where the free market doesn't work so well. And that I think is the exciting part of mechanism design, the fact that we can solve problems which ordinary markets cannot.
Correct. Thank you very much. Yanis had a question that, because he's already in this room, can ask himself, actually.
Yeah, actually, Professor Maskin, thank you so much for the presentation. And as you've also mentioned the election system that you're currently working on, this is, of course, a very interesting topic and very, let's say, actual at the moment in the world, particularly when we look at the US election system. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because it was also one of the proposals for a potential topic how to reduce polarization by reforming the US election system. And this would be very interesting to get your insights on.
Sure. So, in my view, one of the most serious problems that the US faces at the moment, and that's my country, is political polarization. The fact that people on the left are afraid of the people on the right and don't talk to them, and the people on the right are afraid of the people on the left and don't talk to them. There is mutual mistrust and mutual dislike. And you would hope that in a world with so much polarization, we could try to solve that problem by electing officials in the middle. Those officials could serve as a bridge between the two sides and provide some moderation and provide some route for compromise. So finding a way of electing candidates in the middle would be wonderful. But the problem is that the current US election system is not capable of doing that. And let me explain why. As I said, we have polarization, which means that the two major American political parties, the Democratic Party, which is on the left, and the Republican Party, which is on the right, are a long distance away from one another. Suppose that in addition to the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate, there is a third candidate who tries to run in the middle, an independent candidate who runs as a moderate. Well, you would hope that this candidate might be able to win, but not under that's impossible under the American system. Under the American system, every voter votes for a single candidate, and the candidates with the most votes gets elected, even if that's short of a majority. And so for the example I'm giving, where there's a Democratic candidate, a Republican candidate, and a candidate in the middle, what will happen? The Democratic voters will all vote for the Democrat. The Republican voters will all vote for the Republican, and only independent voters who don't have a party affiliation, which is a small fraction of voters, will vote for the candidate in the middle. So the candidate in the middle can't get elected under the current system. And so you might ask, well, is there a better mechanism, a better election system that could replace the current system? And it turns out that there is. And interestingly, this mechanism was invented several hundred years ago in the 18th century by a French thinker named Condorcet. And here's how that mechanism works. Now, instead of just voting for their favorite candidates, each voter ranks the candidates in order. So if I'm a Republican, I might put the Republican first, and then the candidate in the middle second, and the Democrat third. And if I'm a Democratic voter, I would have just the opposite preference. And if I'm an independent voter, well, I rank the independent first, and then I could either rank the Republican or the Democrats second. So each voter is ranking candidates. And now who is going to be the winner of the election? Well, according to Condorcet, the winner should be the candidates who would beat each other candidate by a majority in a pairwise comparison. So if you have a Republican, an independent, and a Democrat, the independent wins if a majority of voters prefer the independent to the Republican, and also a majority of voters prefer the independent to the Democrats. But in fact, that's exactly what is going to happen in this example, because let's compare the independent with the independent candidate with the Republican candidate. That independent candidate is going to be preferred by all the independent voters, and it's also going to be preferred by all of the Democratic voters. All of the Democratic voters prefer the independent to the Republican because the independent is closer to them. So the independent will beat the Republican by a majority. And if we do the argument in the opposite direction, we will see that the independent will also beat the Republican, but they will also beat the Democrat by a majority, because all the Republicans will prefer the independent to the Democrat. So this is a way of getting candidates in the middle elected, not by using the current American system, but by improving that using Condorcet's system. Condorcet's system is sometimes called true majority rule because you get candidates who are truly preferred by a majority elected. That's one example of a fairly straightforward mechanism change, which could have enormous impact on polarization.
Yeah.
So both pollution and US elections are slightly different from the three examples, right? In the three examples, it was clear who is deciding on the mechanism.
That's right.
It might be a parent or a government.
That's right.
In pollution, we need to have independent countries to agree.
That's right.
At least for CO2.
That's right.
And in US elections, we would need Republicans and Democrats to agree on this new system.
Well, actually, let me that's an important observation. Let me say, however, that one strong point of the American system. I've been talking about the weak points, but one strong point of the American system is that when it comes to voting, the U.S. Constitution allows each of the 50 states, to decide for itself what voting system to use. And most states have the ability to change the voting system, not through legislation, but through direct voter participation, which actually this is similar to Switzerland. Switzerland has a lot of what we call direct democracy, where citizens themselves vote on important matters. Well, in the US, we don't have as much direct democracy as in Switzerland, but on the issue of voting systems, we do. So the citizens themselves can choose to adopt Condorcet voting if they so choose. And I'm happy to report that two states, the state of Maine and the state of Alaska, have already adopted a system similar to the one that I was describing through direct referendum. And there are many other states who are moving in that direction. So in the answer to your question, Marek, who is the mechanism designer? In this case, it would be the voters themselves, the citizens themselves, who would be changing the voting system.
Nice.
Thank you very much. There are two short questions, if you do not mind, Professor, that we rob a little bit more of your time. Only one we can take as a final one. Anton is asking a context question related to your personal thinking at the time and state of research in which you were developing the advances that one of the first advances that you did in this field, which is you have published the welfare optimality paper in 1977. If I am not mistaken, at that time, research implementing the Nash equilibrium had some advancements, but was mostly theoretical. What is it that attracted you, or how is it that you decided to research this topic and to apply it to real-world scenarios? As we know, both ideas are now well recognized and receive Nobel Prizes, but at that time, this was probably a research that was much more at the inception ideas at the very early stage. So how it motivated you to move into this direction?
That's right. So when I did write the paper back in 1977, I was mostly interested in the theoretical side. That's true. I mean, I knew in the back of my mind that mechanism design had the potential for being a very useful social tool for solving social and economic and political problems, but I wasn't thinking so directly about that back in the 70s. However, by chance, the world confronted us with a series of problems for which mechanism design seemed exactly right. So I mentioned that in the 1990s, we had this big problem. How were we going to allocate radio spectrum in a way that made sense so that the right telecom companies were getting the right spectrum? Well, those of us in mechanism design saw immediately that the solution to this problem could be provided by mechanism design, and so that was a great problem for us to sink our teeth into from a practical point of view. And then about a decade later, we had the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and which was devastating, and people around the world were asking, well, how can we stop a financial crisis like this from happening again? And that again was a was a problem with mechanism design. How do you set up financial regulations in such a way that you don't have the chain reaction of financial institutions collapsing the way we did in 2008, 2009? So that was another interesting problem that we mechanism designers could sink our teeth into. And now today, as I was just saying in response to Yanis's question, I regard polarization as a major problem to be solved. And so once again, I'm trying to take the ideas, the theoretical ideas from mechanism design, and applying them to tackle this big social and political problem. So it wasn't as though I set out to solve social problems, but as things went along, problems arose which seemed just right for a solution by mechanism design, and that's how I got into the practical aspects of the field.
Good. Thank you very much, Professor. Honestly speaking, thank you very much for the discussion. I do not want to, I really appreciate the flexibility that you had to extend this discussion so much, and thank you for the questions of the audience, but also I thank you especially for the devotion that you had to answer them in so much detail. Thank you so much. It's appreciated. You have a screenshot now, or a live stream from the metaverse as well, popping up as well in the screen. It has been a pleasure to have you as part of this series. We really appreciate this opportunity.
Well,
yes.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Maskin, for your valuable insights today, and we wish you all the best and good luck for your now work with this very important topics. This is, as I can say, so pressing in our world today, and we are very excited to see what's coming out of it. And of course, wish you a wonderful time at the ceremony tonight also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Good to see you.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. To all the audience, thank you very much for joining today. Remember that we will have the opportunity to keep the live stream. We'll have the opportunity to have another Nobel Laureate talk in almost 1 month from now. Now that you downloaded the app and you went through the pain of doing that, it's much simpler. The entry barrier is high, people, but later the content is very appealing. If you want, for example, if you joined the lecture today later, this lecture will be streamed for the next month. Every time that you enter this room, you will be able to listen to it again. Thank you very much. And Professor Pinchia, thank you very much for joining today. It has been a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day or evening ahead, wherever you are. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.